But the thing is, when I go to bed, I get up, I'm like, it's okay. I get up to yeah, 5:30, 45. And my plan is 4, 5, 6. No, that
All right. Okay. Ready to ride? All righty. Let's get started. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, again, we give you thanks for your beautiful and just law, which draws us into your creational purpose for this world and for our own lives and for our relationships. For all the aspects and details of life, we give you thanks because not only have you created them and gifted them, but you also are intertwined with them in a way that continues to give life and hope and redemption to us and to the world. And so we pray that you would open us to that and you would involve us as well in that as you do your work and we are your hands. And so we pray for that in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay. Let's share it up here. Okay. There we go. All right. Back in Exodus 20. For a good reason, we're spending a lot of time here as we work through the commandments. And I think we got through about 3.5 of them last time, right? Something like that. I don't know. I will say this commandment right here that we worked through, or we're up to, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. It's good that we're starting there this week because that is the big, that is the discussion as far as the gospel this Sunday. So this is going to have kind of an import towards our gospel lesson. This is not the assigned text for this Sunday. We're actually not reading the Old Testament text this Sunday. We just have 2 texts. We're a little more streamlined, especially for 10:30, but with preschool Sunday and all this going on with that. But we do have, this does directly relate. What does this commandment mean to remember the Sabbath day and to keep it holy? So, and this was the one too, remember last week we talked about, at least this is my interpretation, not anybody else's, I guess, or maybe it is, but not that I know of, is that we really have 2.5 commandments concerned directly with our vertical relationship with God. And then we have these 7.5 that are concerned with our horizontal relationship with one another. Now, in some ways, that's a wrong thing for me to say. And I would disagree with it now, in a sense, because those are so intertwined. And we see that in the mission and ministry of Jesus, that he is so often concerned with, or when he's questioned about the right thing to do, or the relational thing, or the thing to do, and what's right before in God's eyes, and what's this and what's that he draws it back time and time again to our connection and relation with those around us. What does this mean for our life together? And so, again, that's kind of a lens through which we look at these commandments. And then before we dig into it too, I want to also just go back to something I think I said a couple of weeks ago, and that is, I hope you're having some thoughts because of this interrelatedness, really having some thoughts about wow, I've never seen this commandment this way, or I've never thought about it this way, or you're really open to that study, but also asking that question, what does this mean for my life? What does this mean for my relationships? What does this mean for what's going on in the world? What does this mean for my service? What does this mean for my stewardship? What does this mean for my relationships with other people? These are the things that I'm hoping we pull out of any Bible study, really, but especially as we're looking at this very relational law that's coming from God to God's people. So keep in mind, especially last week, that as God is speaking these commands. So this is not just Moses coming down with tablets at this point, but God is speaking to the people with smoke and fire and a great assurance, not to scare them, but a great assurance that God is here. This is coming directly from God. This is important. This will be a great gift to you. So to swallow all that as an intro, let's dive in here. All right. So I think, were we on verse 8 to 11, maybe? Okay. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Okay. We at least started it. I think we maybe ended on there, but let's read it at least as a start. And if it's an overlap, no big deal. Okay. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work. You, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or the alien resident in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them. But he rested the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and consecrated it. All right. Just as a reminder and kind of connecting with this intro, this is a commandment not only for you as God's people, not only for the faithful, but for the animal kingdom as well, for the plant kingdom as well, and even for those in the human kingdom who do not even worship God, but are just hanging out in your land, right? And so wherever we go in our society today, there's an understanding that we seek out the rest and the renewal of all people and all things. So there's a command here that the creation rests. And just a reminder too, if you remember from last week, God finished the creation in the resting. Not God finished the creation and then rested, but God finished the creation in the resting. So it has something to do with the creative process, and especially that sense of renewal for us as we look at this commandment. Okay. We're going to be in, and I think I have this open on my other computer, so I'll open it here. I just want to introduce you to this just so you see it. Maybe it is here as well. Nope, that's something we're going to come to later. Here it is. So I just want to show you this reading so it kind of primes the pump for Sunday and you're thinking about it as well. This will be our gospel for Sunday. And so you can see how the Sabbath, and like we talked about, the law is, given from God, but it's given as more in a sense of steerage for the ship, because God understands that things will change. And so these laws come from God that are going to have, as we're going to see as we get further in these chapters, lots of interpretation and lots of detail put into them. But how are they interpreted? And that's what we come to here, is in this situation, how the Pharisees interpret and how Jesus interprets them. Have a little bit of oil and water here. So we're not going to do this extensively because that's our Wednesday job, and some of you will be disappointed that you had to do it twice. But I just want to show you this as a way to understand this. So one Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and as they made their way to his disciples began to pluck heads of grain. The Pharisees said to him, "Look, why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" And he said to them, "Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need of food? He entered the house of God when Abiathar was high priest and ate the bread of the presence, which is not lawful for any but the priest to eat. And he gave some to his companions." Then he said to them, "The Sabbath was made for humankind, and not humankind for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord, even of the Sabbath." Now, of course, Jesus is making some pretty bold claims about himself and who he is, the Son of Man, Lord of the Sabbath. Those kinds of things are going to be shocking. That's probably the bigger deal to the Pharisees than what he's doing as far as the plucking of grain. But notice that word there, the Sabbath was made for humankind and not humankind for the Sabbath. Jesus is saying, this law is a gift to you. It's not a great puppet master or whatever up in heaven saying, well, I'm going to give you this and you better follow it or else, this is going to happen. There are consequences, yes, with not resting, not keeping the Sabbath. It's a very broken commandment in our society, but Jesus says clearly, this is gift to you. This was a gift to you from God, part of God's mercy. Now again, Jesus entered the synagogue, so we're still on the Sabbath. And a man was there who had a withered hand. They watched him to see whether he would cure him on the Sabbath, so that they might accuse him. And he said to the man who had the withered hand, come forward. Then he said to them, is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath, to save life or to kill? This is a rhetorical question, by the way. But they were silent. He looked around at them with anger. He was grieved at their hardness of heart and said to the man, stretch out your hand. He stretched it out, and his hand was restored. The Pharisees went out and immediately conspired with the Herodians against him, how to destroy him. Okay. So what is the Sabbath? What is the Sabbath? It is a gift, along with the other commandments. What is the Sabbath for? It is to do good, and it is to heal, and it is to give life. So we can see how Jesus frames that outside of what I like to call the Santa Claus God. I like St. Nicholas. I'm not against Santa Claus, but you better watch out. You better not cry. You better not pout or have other emotions that make adults feel uncomfortable. And by the way, I'm looking at you while you're sleeping and when you're awake, which is a little weird too. But we have a God of who is really less like the Santa Claus song and more like the St. Nicholas, who put gold in the stockings of young women who would have not had a dowry. That's the kind of action. That's the kind of care that God has, not waiting for us to mess up, kind of a thing. Okay. Any thoughts, questions, or insights on that before we go to next command? Yeah, please.
It says,
Mhm.
do not allow foreigners to work in the country. It's unique in this respect to other communities. It's beyond saying, do not let foreigners work in the alliance. For instance, like most all commandments, you think of them all as directed specifically at people who want to be righteous, and not as, it's your responsibility or your role to call others to do this or that.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Yeah. Now you said in the first commandment or in which commandment are you talking about, or where are you looking on the Sabbath? Oh yeah. Do not. Yeah. So it's saying that even foreigners are not allowed to work because they're supposed to have a rest day, just like you're supposed to have a rest day. So it isn't that you're supposed to pawn your work off on them. There was a commentator this week I showed this on Wednesday, but there was a commentator this week who said, she said, I'm going to make some people mad in saying this, I bet, but she said, if you go out to dinner on the Sabbath because you're thinking I need rest from cooking, remember that somebody else is cooking that food and they're not getting a Sabbath, right? Kind of thing. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily that all restaurants should close on the Sabbath day, and we can't have things that close on the Sabbath. You can't call 911 and say, I've got an emergency, and for the firefighters or police to say, well, it's the Sabbath, sorry, we're resting today, right? And actually, there is allowance for life-saving kinds of things. In fact, we were talking about this yesterday, but even if you have a sore throat, and it's like, well, where's that going to lead? You are allowed to take medicine for your sore throat on the Sabbath day. Right? But the withered hand wouldn't be considered life-saving. So that was against the rules. But you see how the rules get to be primary versus the intent of the law, and the intent of the law gets secondary. Jesus kind of flips that around. But yeah, good point. Nobody works on that day. Nobody is supposed to do labor that can rest, kind of a thing. And if they have to do labor that day, then there should be a Sabbath for them at another time. Yeah. Your dad didn't know that? Did he work every day? He had you do chores on Sunday. Well, that is technically the first day of the week, and the Sabbath is Saturday. So, but did you do chores on Saturday too? Yeah. That's yeah. You turned out well. Yeah. Yeah, Jesus actually comes across that. With the woman who stooped over, he says, okay, so you can give a horse water or you can give your animals water on the Sabbath, but a daughter of Abraham cannot be released from her. Sabbath is
Seventh day.
yeah, it's the seventh day, which would be Saturday, but our Sabbath generally as Christians, we consider that Sunday. So it isn't necessarily that it has to be Saturday. And the importance of the command, and again, that's the rule, right? But the importance of it is that everyone receives rest, including the creation itself. Yeah.
And when God rested on the seventh day, it says, give thanks to God, as this
Right.
And
Yeah.
He is working.
Mhm.
but it's not the same kind of.
Yeah. Right. By the way, do you know when your brain works the most, when your brain is most active? When you're sleeping. Yeah, I think most people have heard that now. That shocked me. I was a psych major. I never heard that until about 10 years or 15 years ago. Yeah. When people say I need to sleep on it, there's something real about that. Right? Right? Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Something's good.
Mhm. Mhm.
The vehicle is necessary to operate the ship.
Mhm. Mhm. Right. Right. Mhm. Yeah. And as we go throughout the law, and even as it's defined, the necessary still goes on. There's an understanding of that. Yeah. Was there a comment? Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, we have a pastor who's on sabbatical right now. That's a sense of that. The earth is supposed to, you don't plow the land on the seventh year. There's lots of things like that. Okay, I saw a hand over here. I thought, did you have a comment? Yeah.
Saturday night is the same night, people bathe on Saturday night, they cut their hair pretty, they fix their shoes.
Mm-hmm.
And we wash clothes on Sunday, so we have to make sure all the clothes are done.
Yeah.
We
Mm-hmm.
eat bread on Saturday, so,
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Yeah. And that can, we're always on that sort of road with two ditches can become, although it doesn't sound like in your case it was, but it can become like an oppressive thing or a race or other things are put aside. But I bet there was a lot of family connection and working together and community and things that were built into that because you were, and a sense of honor and a sense of worship and all that went into that next day. Right. Yeah. And a rest and a time together then for family. Yeah, exactly. How many steps you take out of bed isn't as important to Jesus as, someone receiving renewal kind of a thing. And so Jesus kind of says, this commandment isn't just to preserve you from dying, but it is to give you that they may have life and have it abundantly, as he says later. So, yeah.
Here to talk about contradiction is that
Yeah.
the Pharisees.
Oh.
The Pharisees.
Yeah, hold on, I'll pull it up.
They didn't like the fact that his apostles, disciples picked grain at that time, just like work. But still, and I realize probably because he says he's the Son of Man, they wanted to kill him.
Yeah.
Now, that's much worse. That's a lot murder.
There is a commandment about that coming up. Yeah. Yeah.
So which way you want to look at it?
Yep. There was an obscure movie called So I Married an Axe Murderer years ago, if anybody saw it. One of my favorite lines was when the girlfriend in the thing, the suspected person who's doing this, and this boyfriend is starting to figure things out, said, "You ever stand on a cliff and you just want to push somebody?" And he's like, "Ah!" And then he says, "I tend to follow the Judeo-Christian ethic of thou shalt not kill." Right. So let's look at that one. All right. Moving on here, and let's get yeah, go ahead. They killed him they killed him on Friday, which would have been sundown, would have started the Sabbath on Friday. And so his death actually comes before it would have been sundown. And part of the women going to the tomb early on Sunday morning is that they are going as soon as they can after the Sabbath. So they're taking their rest on the Sabbath from that Friday night to that Sunday morning, really. Yeah. Yep. But Sunday was the first day of the week. That was back to work day. It's a little different than it is in our culture for the most part. Yeah. And certainly in our Christian practice. And I don't know, maybe somebody knows this better, by the way, because maybe this will come up, but there's this sense of the eighth day, that it's kind of like the extra day, or the kind of the Lord's, it almost has like a, I hate to say end of times, but like Christ coming again is like the eighth day, this extra opening. And I think that has something to do with why our worship is on Sunday. There may be other reasons too, or maybe some of you know some reasons about why we don't worship on Saturday, but instead on Sunday. So I don't know. You can look that up. There's homework for somebody. All right. Okay, so we get a slew here, and we'll take these kind of one at a time, but honor your father and mother, so that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. I always hear, I brought you into this world and I can take you out. That's not a good interpretation, but I always hear that. So you shall not murder. There we go. And the C there's a little deal there that says probably kill is another, whoops, if I can get on it, or kill. You shall not murder, kill. That's an important one, especially in this community. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or male or female slave, or ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. Okay. Let's take these one at a time. So let's look at the fourth commandment here. Or however you're counting, it might be fifth if you're counting in a different way, but honor your father and mother. What do we have here? I know we have a lot of parents in this room that probably like this one. Anybody ever used it before with your kids? Yeah, no, I get it. No, I get it. We were having a little conversation about the Sabbath, and it's like, yeah, we didn't ever say, I don't want to go to church. Never would have said that. Yeah. Even in my generation, which I'm sure you all saw as lost and forsaken, right? Yeah. We were the first generation to be crossed out. Generation X, we don't want you. Or we're the treasure. X marks the spot. I don't know which it is. Yeah. How many of you have heard this as obey your father and mother?
Well, then respect. What if you have bad parents? How can you respect them?
So when we talk about, and it's not, certainly not the only thing we talk about, but we do try to, at some point in the year with our young people, talk about, or if we've been in these commandments with confirmation and things like that, I always pause at this one and talk about what it means to honor versus what it means to obey. Because in abusive cases, or things where, your parents maybe are doing things that are not honoring God, and you don't want to follow along with that. Even that kind of a thing. What does this commandment mean, right, for us? So we talk about how obeying your father and mother is to take the abuse, but to honor your father and mother would be to get help, both for yourself and for them. Because there are other commandments that and other things that God talks about, and certainly Jesus talks about, that are about our own safety and wholeness and shalom and all of that kind of thing. But also telling someone so that the person who's doing these things would also get the help that they need, or the accountability that they need, right? Yeah.
I think it also has to do with. Well, it's not in your manners, when you.
There's a lot of that too. Yep. Mind your P's and Q's. Yep, it does, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. There's a chain of command, right? Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. What's that? He's read the catechism. Yeah. You have. Good job. All right. What does this mean? We should fear and love God so that we do not despise or anger our parents and other authorities, but honor them, serve and obey them, love and cherish them. Now, Luther does use the word obey here as well. I don't know what the German word is for it. I didn't go that far into it, but yeah, there's and you can go to I've even got this big honker pulled up. This is the large catechism, so you can get lots of explanation if you want it on the commandments. There we go. But yeah, the basics of that is that, yes, it does also translate then to those in authority. Again, the honor, essential for social stability. Very nice. Yeah. You think so? Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think too, in our modern age, there are a lot of ways, Fred Heim points this out, in which our government has taken over some of the responsibility for the care of our elderly. That would not have been the case for the Hebrew people in this, especially not in this time. And so that commandment doesn't run out when you turn 18 or when you go to college or when you get married or when you have children or that kind of thing. But that honor changes and evolves a bit as people age. And so some in this room, some who aren't in this room because they can't get here, or some who have been in this room but aren't with us anymore, you know, as they've gone into care or needed that kind of thing, what does that look like even for adult children, kind of a thing. So this is a lifelong thing. It's kind of, we say a lot that they're never not your kids, but the reverse is true. They're never not your parents either. And that becomes a point of issue at particular times in Scripture. Jesus even addresses it a little bit with how we take care of our parents who've gone before us. So yeah. Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. So if you couldn't hear that, if a child makes a comment to a parent or maybe kind of calls them out a little bit and says, you know, a parent's going to really listen to that. Yeah. Stop smoking, right? Don't smoke. Yeah. Actions. Yeah, please.
This being for the purpose of authority.
Uh-huh.
Look at it that way. You might also see it as not from the perspective of the child or the person who's under authority, but from the perspective of the authority. You might say it is incumbent upon you, if you're a king or whatever, to behave in a way that inspires honor and respect. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this commandment is as much, I think, for the parents or the authority as it is for those who are under that authority or under that power. Yeah, and there's a lot of upheaval in our society right now, and we continually need to kind of question what is this? Is this honoring, dishonoring, and it's going to be different in different situations, and sometimes we have to kind of parse out of that. Some of this is honoring, and some of it has just become, bandwagoning, or it's become, part of it's dishonoring or whatever it might be. And so we're constantly called as Christians to discern that, to be respectful and humble and listening, but also to be respectful and honoring of the authority. Yeah.
Why don't come off? Then have-
Yeah, right.
But it's on my blind side.
That's right. That's right. Yep.
So it is when you talk about
Mhm. Right. Yeah.
Clearly, is it mine?
No, right, for sure. And that's kind of a radical thing for Paul to say, frankly, in Ephesians 6. Thanks for that cross-reference. Yeah, for sure. And I'm laughing because it wasn't last night, I don't think. I think it was the night before where I was trying to get my kid to bed. And it's the irony is that I could drop into a totally imaginative world just getting ready for bed at night, right? And my child apparently has inherited that from me. But I came into the room and my wife's just laughing. She goes, "Oh, it's so funny listening to Zoe yell at you." And I was like, "Hey," she goes, "No, it was kind of funny because she never really gets too mad at you." But yeah, she was definitely like, "Get out of here, Dad. I'm doing what I'm doing and I'll be done when I'm done." kind of a thing. Right. Now that might have been a situation where she was a little bit angry. I don't know that I had provoked her, but you know, you can judge and jury can decide on that. Yeah.
It's very difficult
Hmm.
when the roles begin to be reversed.
Yeah.
When the
Yeah.
child becomes the parent
Hmm.
to the elderly
Mhm.
parent.
Hmm.
I think that really is a difficult.
Yeah.
Because you have to insist on a lot of things that they don't want.
Right. Right.
For sure.
Yeah. And there's something beautiful in these like in my generation to say, "Oh, my mom's my best friend," or you know, I love hanging out with my parents would be like, "Oh, you're weird." Now that's very common. For girls to say my mom's my best friend is extraordinarily common, right? And that's a beautiful thing. And it has some, you know, some pitfalls too. Yeah, right. Right.
But.
Yeah. Yeah. I talked about my mom with my best friend. Yeah, right. Right. Kind of a thing. But yeah, there's good and bad of that. And that's where when those roles get kind of muddied, or you have and we have sort of these caricatures sometimes in movies where, you know, I'm the fun mom and I just want to be your friend. And the kid is like, "Mom, please go away." Like you're being cringy. Yeah. Hmm. Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Uh-huh. Yeah. 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 When your children become adults, he was saying they start to make recommendations to you. And I thought you were making a little bit of a funny, but no, you were being serious. The example, his daughter, Therese, is a nutritionist. Is that right word? An expert. She's worked at the hospital here. She's worked all kinds of places. And she is an expert on health and nutrition and things like that. So that, but also other things where make that, you know, when my son went to college, I had a really hard time, way harder than I thought I would, really struggled with it. And somebody said something that at the time didn't really register that much, but I certainly remember it. And they said, you know, there's a real gift when you get to start to have adult conversations with your kids. There's a change and there's something kind of beautiful about that. And it's true. It's true. In fact, in the last month, my son has given me invaluable advice on something, a couple of things I was really struggling with. So it wasn't finances. No, because I wouldn't understand what he was saying. My wife has a chance. I don't have any chance. Don't ever make me the treasurer of the church. I mean, that's inappropriate for a pastor, but you don't want it anyway. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Mhm.
that they can begin to say, now you see that.
Yeah.
And my mom was really into that, my grandma.
Oh, mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. And sometimes those things are good and necessary, and sometimes as we lose some of our sharpness and faculties, that can be hard to hear, because it's a reminder that they're having to now do a little parenting maybe for us. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yeah. But.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then the other thing is, can the Ten Commandments be divided into three groups? And I'm thinking, because it seems like the first few verses, commandments have to do with our relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have our relationship with the authorities over us.
Mm-hmm.
And then our relationships with everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. You could divide them that way for sure. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And this one definitely speaks to that. It is kind of interesting, by the way, too. And I know you have your hand up, but I'm going to go to you, a previous comment, when you're talking about even the foreigners, even the ones who don't worship your God and don't practice they get rest too. There's a justice in that, a universal justice. There's also in this, it says, honor your father and your mother. That's a pretty radical thing to say in a patriarchal society. Not that it's upsetting to the culture or that kind of thing, but it acknowledges the role of both parents in that way, which I think is important for us to see as well. So yeah, new comment. Go ahead. Mhm, mhm.
And then to the peers. And I would say, well, there was when there were questions to Jesus where someone said, what is the most important commandment? And honor and love God with all your heart.
Uh-huh.
And then the second most important one is love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
And that would sort of be similar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. And there are really three parts to that. And I have to tell you, it wasn't until I did we did a Wednesday night youth night on those. We did a series of 3, and it was honor God, honor neighbor, or love your neighbor, love God, love your neighbor, and then love yourself. And I was a very loved child growing up, had great idyllic life growing up, but I had never heard. We were always very focused on outside. Are we caring for other people? Are we caring for other people? It was the first time in my life that I had really heard. I'd listened, or really listened to. Maybe I'd heard it, but I hadn't really listened to love yourself, and how that's connected to love of neighbor and love of God. Right? Hatred of self makes the other things kind of impossible, or puts a big roadblock between them. So they all go together. So there are 3 parts of that too. Yeah, for sure. Okay. All right. He does say Fredheim says something about that your days may be long, this kind of connection on here. He says, the unique extension of the commandment that your days may be long is neither strictly promise nor implied warning. Though there are some pretty strict judgments against whoever strikes father or mother and shall be put to death, and whoever curses father or mother shall be put to death. Well, I don't know that I haven't hit my parents, but I'm certain I've talked back to them in a way that was pretty within the line of that. That's pretty harsh. If the commandment is obeyed, life will go better for one, generally speaking. That's the meaning of this commandment. But this is not inevitably the case. But God is saying, this sense of order, this honoring of father and mother, and this honoring of authority, which is really implied by extension, and certainly Luther points it out, and others have pointed it out, really does give good order, and it makes life go better, right? Strict obedience under a dictator like a Hitler or that kind of stuff, not better. But again, we need the other commandments around this to order that life and to frame what it means to honor and whether or not the authority is worthy of that honor. Yeah, Kim in the back. Yeah.
If you have a household where, the child, and I'm not talking about household, but there are cases where children actually do take care of their parents.
Mhm.
My household is like that in terms of, trying to make sure that they were happy and that they were, not disappointed and,
Mhm.
anyway, whatever it is that you do to take care of them, whatever.
Right.
Lack of going on, that's not the natural order of things. The order is that the parents take care of children.
Mhm.
And so I think, a way to do this, kind of a threat hunting is that this is it's a healthy thing for a child to honor the parent and for the parent to be worthy of that honor.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. Mhm.
Because all kinds of mental illness and inability to have healthy relationships.
Oh, yeah.
result from this.
Yeah. One of the most beautiful things I think Luther says is that parenting is, and he really struggled, by the way, with marriage being a sacrament, right? But it didn't meet the criteria of a sacrament. And so he didn't include it, but he struggled with that. And what was I going to say? Oh, but he did say that parenting is probably the closest we can be to showing the next generation what God looks like. Children will get a picture of what God is like, especially with this language of father or parent or even mother language. They will get a picture of what God looks like from their parents. And that's, when you think about it that way, it's like, ooh, that's quite a responsibility, right? Yeah. Okay. You shall not kill, or you shall not murder. Next commandment. Actually, the NRSV says you shall not murder. I think the RSV might say you shall not kill. So, yeah. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think it's really important. I've heard that in this community, a military community, that this commandment, the commandment, you shall not murder, in other words, with intent and with kind of planning to. Yeah, no, you don't steal from the offering. We thought we had that happen one time, and then we found that some things got stuck, some bags got stuck. Yeah, that was yep. Yeah, yeah. We redid the whole offering thing and all that kind of stuff, and then they found them when they took it apart. And I still kick myself because I thought, what if that was my immediate thought. What if they're like dropped somewhere that we're not seeing, but I don't have a key to that room. We have the God key. It opens every door in this church except for that room. That's a special locked away key, of course, because yeah. Darn it, if that wasn't the case in the end, we had to cancel chat. It was a whole mess, as some of you probably remember. And I think it might have happened on the 1st of the month too, which is when a lot of people will give their first fruits and for the whole month. So anyway, yeah. In this community, it's really important because we have soldiers, we have military in this community. And so, are they commanded not to ever fire a weapon? Are they commanded not to ever press a button or have a dogfight or whatever, branch of the military they're in? Fredheim talks about this. He says it's never been, yeah, I have it highlighted here. This commandment is never kind of fleshed out in used of killing in war. So, but any taking of a life is taking on, if we think back to Pharaoh, what was the kind of the issue? Pharaoh was taking life. Pharaoh was taking on the clothes of God or a God to take life from even from the Hebrews, even from people that weren't his own. And what happens at the end? What's the last plague that God, in a one-time off and with no other options, basically exhausting all those other 11 plagues, shows I am God and you are not, by taking life, right? Okay, so that's to be really, and of course, anytime we enter into any kind of conflict or war or whatever it might be, we have all kinds of ways to do that now that are airstrikes and drone drops and things like that that are very detached. Is you know, this command draws us into a very what am I trying to say? A very thought out examination of what will be the impact, kind of a thing. So yeah, but to lie in wait, to be envious of someone, and this is connected to the commandments that are going to come after it, to be vengeful, to take matters into your own hands apart from the law. Those are all things that would be under this murder clause there, and then over here. Yeah. Yeah.
Recall that God commanded Abraham to kill Isaac. Now, yes, it is the case he permitted it to actually go through.
Yeah.
But the notion that God would order someone to do something contrary to his commandments is a bit of a interesting detail.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and it what's that?
They didn't help.
Yes, true. But at least not in this fashion, but we see throughout this journey that they were keeping the Sabbath with the manna story and things like that as well, or at least we're being worked into that. I think that story is really interesting, and it was I won't go into all of it, but it has a long history in our family. Not by reenacting it, by the way. But one of the interesting things and one of the troublesome things in that is that Abraham obeyed God, and it's celebrated in the sense that, well, he had such faith in God that he was even willing to kill the promise, kind of a thing. And there's some truth in that, but there's also, you know, I get the reaction by folks of how could a father possibly do that? How could that be God's will? There was child sacrifice in the Canaanite society surrounding Abraham and Sarah and their family. And I would say that story is to show that this is not how God will work, and leading Abraham to that fact. So we can talk about Abraham's obedience and all those kinds of things, but personally, I think the crux of that story is God's leading Abraham to this thing that other people and other folks around them did, but to distinguish how they would be from those cultures around them, because sacrificing another human or a child was not necessarily completely out of the realm of possibility. So in order to distinguish how I will be as your God from how these gods, these false gods, are being worshipped in this sacrificial kind of way, God walks him through that and makes the point in that fashion. Yeah. So that's a side, but thank you for bringing it up.
The military.
Yeah.
Hill,
Mm-hmm.
because Bert did many missions over the whole team.
Yep. No.
And he said he was very much aware of the killing they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
They were saving a lot of soldiers, but one guy came up to me and said, you know, we just love those guys. They helped us calm officers, one of them. They saved us. So it was, but he was aware of the killing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I learned that thank God, there are all kinds of levels of things like the preparedness and the strategic air command, you know, where they were always ready to go and didn't have to. And the people were actually in combat, thank God, is a smaller, very small percentage of the actual population of the military as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of support for the case if. But when it happens, and I think PTSD, I read somewhere, anybody who had done combat.
Yeah.
Had some form. And fortunately, there didn't show much. We had a couple of patients with
Yeah.
in that state, but
Yeah.
that was really a very big thing to me, because we have readiness and preparedness when we have actual things. And
Yeah.
God's coming back to the Near East.
Yeah.
Something else.
Yeah. And I don't think there's a way to not have some form, some level of PTSD when you have to take another life. You could be having your house robbed and your family threatened, their lives of your children threatened, and you can know it's the right thing, and there will be some trauma with taking the life of another person. We are made that way. We are made with connection and care for human life. And so, yeah. And it's something that I'm thankful when it happens, and it hasn't always happened, that we do deal with that, because that should be a primary piece of combat veterans and anybody who's been in combat for the military to be attentive to that, and our government to be attentive to that throughout the life. Yeah, go here, and then might've been one over here. Okay.
The Hebrew word in that word.
Yeah. And I was going to look at that. So thank you.
And
Yep.
after the Hebrews got to the whole way, God had to slaughter everybody there. So
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, there would be some, right. And that gets back to your comment as well, that there are places where the people are commanded to take over and completely, wipe out. So what do we do with that? I think there was a hand over here, but I know you had one up here, maybe not. Yeah. And then we'll go to you, Bill.
The command for Adam and Eve was created.
Yeah, right. That would have been maybe better.
but you would have needed the adult.
No, you wouldn't have needed the adultery one. That's true. That would have been one. Yeah. Okay, I'm trying to get down to that word, but yeah, please. Can you get louder?
Serving enlistedness with suffering. We didn't call on to launch our vessels, which would result in the deaths of millions and millions of people.
Yeah.
Part of it, think about that, because later on, Russians on the USSR NCHC.
Uh-huh.
First meeting we had a whole Sunday. Just the right thing, we roll up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember you telling me that, and I don't know if I told you at the time, but I grew up in a house that had 2 bumper stickers on the wall. One said, "People are not for hitting, and children are people too." And we sheltered abused women and children in our home. One of my fondest memories is this Polish family of 7 that was in our home for a week or a couple of weeks, I think. I can't eat pierogi from Costco because it's just not, I can't even eat it from anybody but those people. I think they were amazing cooks. And then we had, I don't remember what it said, but it was something about nuclear proliferation, against it. Right. Okay. So I grew up thinking, and I had one uncle who didn't talk about his Marine Corps experience in Korea. Probably the Marine Corps was not the place for him, and that was about it. And I had a grandpa who died before I was born, who got sick in the military. He got the last pandemic and basically died from that eventually. So coming to Tacoma first, and then coming out here, I had such a new appreciation, and my peripheral vision really widened. That story in particular that you told me was, and what I remember in my head is they didn't want to kill us. We didn't want to kill them. Now, of course, you didn't want to, but you knew each other. You had a relationship and a connection with each other, and you could see the power of the weapons that you had and what they could do. And there was some thoughtfulness and some, the gravity of that kind of thing. And that made me think back to, how I was raised, and I can appreciate that. And then also, what you said about being in that very high office of having that relationship. Yeah. Oh, really? Oh, interesting. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. How interesting. God does the sort of face to face. You can't see my face or you'll die, but the cloud and smoke to face of people and this interpersonal connection with the commandments. And, you know, we see how that works out in the day to day. Yeah, really powerful. Yeah, good stuff. Okay. I'm promising myself we're going to get through the 10 commandments today. Okay. You shall not kill. Yeah. So the verb there is rasha. I think it's how you say it. I'll look in here. Or excuse me. Yeah, it's the root verb is rasha. Kill, murder, strike down, to slay, to break, or to dash in pieces. Let's see. I'll go to the BDB. That's my most dependable resource. So there's been some, Fredheim fleshes this out. He says the meaning of the verb to kill has been much debated. It's been suggested that the verb means murder. It can also relate to unintentional killing, although, yeah, maybe. It's never used of killing in war. He sees the best function of understanding it in 21:12. Whoever strikes a person mortally shall be put to death. And Numbers 35:20-21. Likewise, if someone pushes another from hatred, or hurts or hurls something at another, lying in wait, and death ensues, or an enmity strikes another with a hand, and death ensues, then the one who struck the blow shall be put to death. That person is a murderer. So there you go. The avenger of blood shall put the murderer to death when they meet. So that's kind of how he sees that. He says this, and this is his kind of words, but murder does not sufficiently capture this sense for the word. The more general word kill serves the community of faith best, forcing continual reflection on the meaning of the commandment and reminding all that in the taking of human life for any reason, one acts in God's stead. We talked about that. And then down here, the basis of the command is that all life belongs to God. And then again, he says, discernment regarding the divine will remains the central issue, not least in recognition of the principle. New occasions teach new duties. Who would claim, for example, that this is applicable today? So in talking about these kinds of things, whoever strikes mother or father shall be put to death. Whoever kidnaps a person shall be put to death. Whoever curses father or mother shall be put to death, right? So he's just talking about the fluidity of the law. But I think this is probably the important thing, is the basis of the command is that all life belongs to God. And so in every instance, when we talk about the potential of taking human life, we see, we see that in the sense of a child of God. Now that's hard, because in war, the most effective way to get is to dehumanize the one who is the enemy, right? So we see that, we saw that with the Nazis, but we also saw that with the depiction of the Japanese in things like that. Maybe, I don't know if any of you are old enough to have seen some of those things that would come on at the movies before a film or something like that would depict the Japs or whatever it might be. So I have a Japanese, my best friend in college was half Japanese, and his grandparents were interned in California. So they remember that. And they were lucky to come back to their almond farms, and they were still theirs and still intact, but they knew lots of people who lost business or home or farm or things like that as well. So the temptation is always to dehumanize in order to kill. And we have to do that, frankly, in order to kill. Every domestic violence begins with name calling. Absolutely 100%. Because you don't kill a person who has a name, you kill an object that has a derogatory name. So you use the B word, or you use whatever words for someone before you can strike them. 100% of the cases. Yeah. So, okay. Yes, please. And then. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
The Germans that Syrian there, dehumanize them so totally.
Yeah. Yeah. And the number was part of that, numbering them. I mean, it was a system of organization, but it was also that. In the concentration camp I went to, they built a zoo on the other side of the fence in full view of the prisoners, and the children of the officers and things like that would come around and feed the animals and things like that in front of a place. In fact, in one case, they had all of them stand outside, and they just basically froze to death from the outside in, while these animals, fat and happy, were in this little miniature zoo. And the gates on the front said, "You get what you deserve." So it was blame and shame, and then dehumanization. And you can see we can see the horrific results of that, and why this commandment is so key. Yeah.
It seems to me there's a difference between murder and killing somebody. case, you're acting on your own initiative,
Mhm.
and on the other case, you're acting on the authority of God.
Mm. Yeah, yeah,
I mean, the other one.
yeah,
Because
Yeah.
because you're still killing a life form when you,
yeah.
and apparently, even if you love that person,
Uh-huh.
the command is.
Yeah.
is take
Yeah.
that life.
Yeah, right, right. Yeah, I mean, these, these passages like this one he's asking about, is there applicability for that now, are pretty hard to hear. Gosh, your child strikes you and you take it to that level. But, yeah, I think in some cases and in some cases with books like Joshua or Joshua, or some of these books where there's really, a complete wiping out of a people is hard to take. And we have to kind of look back with that and understand what that meant then and what it means now. Yeah, go ahead.
Chapter 21.
Yeah.
12 through 17.
Mm-hmm.
This must be a good argument for the death penalty.
Ah, yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. 21 what? Oops. Okay. Law concerning violence. Yeah. Yeah. No, I can't get this thing out of my way. Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to change my screen so I can get back to my Bible.
But a man schemes and kills another man, deliberately take him away from my altar and put him to death.
Mm-hmm.
And then each one of those verses says the person must be put to death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah, and we get other places in, and yeah, those are hard words to hear. And we have to say again, if this law is just every word for word for all time and all place pillar, and I guess we should get back to that. But we're going to run into some things that are going to be pretty uncomfortable for us, like the ones I just read, 21:15. But if this is steerage for a ship in a changing world, what do we have to deal with those kinds of things now? Or is that right? And we still have debates about the death penalty. And we have debates about all kinds of things that have to do with the end of life, the beginning of life. There are all kinds of opinions and debates and things like that. And even within the Christian church, there are thoughts about that. So yeah, it is. Yeah, please.
But Luther extends the do not murder to include helping your neighbor in his need.
Yep.
Right? Is there a biblical basis for that, or is he just trying to make the law even harder to follow?
Yeah, we should fear and love God so that we do not hurt or harm our neighbor in his body, but help and support him in every physical need. Just so people see that. I think there is a biblical basis for that. When Jesus takes this in Matthew 5 in the Beatitudes, or in the Sermon on the Mount, excuse me, not the Beatitudes per se. But Jesus says, you've heard it said, you shall not murder. But I tell you, everyone who hates their brother or sister has committed murder. Oops. And you say, who's murdered somebody? And even if you have, you're probably not going to raise your hand, but probably going to be very, very few people, depending on the company you keep, I suppose. But if you say who has hated their brother or sister, all the hands in the room go up, except for the liars, right? And then there's another command for you later. You shall not bear false witness, right? So I would say that's where that comes in. Yeah.
So that's the difference if he gets hurt. If you kill
Yeah.
somebody, they get hurt. If you hate somebody.
Yeah.
you-
Yeah. Right. You both get hurt. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Mandela. Uh-huh. Yeah. Hate is like drinking poison and hoping your enemy will die. Yes. There's in our confirmation stuff, the guy he wrote that we used to use, Rich Melheim, when he talks about revenge and coveting and killing, especially, or murdering. He does cartoons too, and he has this guy who's just like red in the face and just as much, and he's like, he's like, I'll show you, I'll get high blood pressure and have risk of a heart attack and occupy all my free time with anger and, you know, this, that, and the other kind of thing. And that'll teach you, you know, kind of a thing. And we have to confront that. And sometimes I think this gets into a really good discussion of forgiveness. We were talking about this just last night. Yeah, get your dander up. That's right. But it gets to this whole thing about forgiveness. Because I was talking to a young person last night about forgiving a friend who really hurt her. And we talked about how forgiveness may not, and she's not sure about forgiving him, and she's not sure about even a conversation with him if she feels good and safe and all that around that kind of a thing. And I said, well, forgiveness sometimes is giving to God what you're carrying as a weight if you don't get the opportunity. I've talked to people who've been, you know, abused by somebody that they never got the chance to talk to. They died before, or that kind of thing. And so forgiveness is not going to be them saying that what they did was wrong. They're not going to get that opportunity. Unless God opens up somehow the windows of heaven and you get to have a conversation, you're not going to get that. So what does forgiveness look like now? Forgiveness is making whole that which is broken. It's taking Jesus seriously when he says, take my yoke upon you. It's taking seriously, I'm taking all of your burden and I'm giving you all of my righteousness. And so we get a wider scope of what sin and forgiveness and brokenness look like. It's not just about, I did this wrong, I have to say I'm sorry, now you have to forgive me. It's not that simple. And it's certainly not forgive and forget, which is one of my least favorite sayings in the world. But it is an unburdening of that which we are carrying. Yeah, please.
On the matter of hate,
Yeah.
there's some scripture, I forget exactly which, that says, you're better if you're slow to anger.
Uh-huh.
And I think the distinction between saying that and saying do not have anger.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely it is. And we're shown in scripture with the book of Job, especially and in other places, even anger at God is okay. God can deal with that. There is space in God to bounce around with all the emotions that you have. And certainly, you know, how you live your anger out and that you have it are different things. But yeah, having that anger is, I mean, you can't prevent it sometimes. Yeah. Yeah, please.
So is the punishment for murder the same as the punishment for not lying about the same?
For you, yes. Yes, just for you though. There's a clause. You have to use special water, holy water, to uncover it, but it has your name right there. No. Yeah. It might be on your own soul, depending on the situation. You know, I've walked by a lot of people that could have used a sandwich, but there's one particular place which I remember where I felt a call to feed this guy and didn't. And it's haunted me ever since that I missed a conversation with God because I didn't do that. Now, so yeah, that punishment is still there in a sense, or that miss on my part is still there. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Right. Exactly. Yeah, please.
On that comment about the sandwich.
Yeah.
I think there's some language in here, I forget exactly what it was, that insinuates most negligence, constitutes harm.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know where that is. I do know the one that you were saying before about, yeah, be slow to anger and, you know, do not let the sun go down on your anger. I don't know if those are related or not. I might be mixing them, but yeah, it's all there. All right. Everybody's favorite commandment, you shall not commit adultery. Yes. And I told you I'm from a very pious place. My poor dear father, when we talked about adultery in confirmation, could not speak about it. He had to play a record of this lady talking about it. And we all just sort of giggled in the background, but I have no idea what she said, not one word, but I just felt super uncomfortable as my poor father sat there red-faced having this lady say it for him. Oh, funny. He's a good pastor, but he couldn't go there. All right. So a commandment that Fredheim defines as designed to be protective of the family here with adultery. So, and yeah. It is, it doesn't necessarily, although I think it speaks to this as a whole and the wholeness of family and relationship and things like that. People are surprised to hear this, but the divorce rate for people who live together before they're married is actually higher than those who don't. But it doesn't necessarily address that. It is, but if you are betrothed in this culture, if you're betrothed, just like Mary and Joseph were, that wasn't like an engagement where you're probably going to get married, but you might not. It was kind of done at that point. And it's certainly in the covenant of marriage. So it's protecting this covenant, the covenants, both of betrothal and the covenant of marriage. It isn't necessarily talking about premarital sex or living together or those kinds of things. But again, I think if we take the ship and steer it or see how the ship has gone, we can see the effects of that. How does that affect other relationships and things like that? Intimacy between two people on this level is one of the greatest gifts that God gives of connection, and that we're made for this connection in lots of ways. This is the pinnacle of that kind of connection. And so it's mentioned by name here in the commandments. Yeah, please.
We've got experiences where friends, family have gone through some of that.
Yeah.
And the pain
Mhm.
that occurs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is supposed to be one of the things that never goes away.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't just affect the family.
Mhm.
Well, it does. It definitely.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing is that it also is almost like a murder of the other person sometimes.
Yeah.
Depends on what the situation is.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
I think we kind of tend to forget about this.
Yeah, there's definitely a death in a divorce, no matter how well it's done. We've had some families in this congregation who've really been good stewards of one another, and especially their kids in a divorce. Certainly I've seen it go the other way for sure too, and I've seen necessary divorces too, not because of, but this is especially addressing that and it gets into these covenanting commands, is that you are pursuing after someone else, or you're having these relations, this gift of intimacy that we have, that's outside that relationship that breaks it. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. We've had people stay together through those things too. And probably stories of that or have stories of that as well. Yeah.
Somebody looks on a woman, I believe his wife was.
Yes.
Totally compared to his heart.
Yep.
That's somebody-
Yes, it is. Right after the one about murder and hating your brother or sister is the one about Jesus says, "You've also heard, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you, any man," and it goes to the men only in this one, but any man who looks lustfully upon a woman has already committed adultery with her in his heart. And this gets to some modern examples that they didn't necessarily have in that day of, the pandemic of pornography and other kinds of things that's just all over and so accessible. I can't imagine having a cell phone in my hand, an unlocked cell phone in my hand as a 12-year-old boy who's wondering about all these kinds of things, right? And a girl as well. I mean, we have Pandora's box open in alarming kind of ways. Yeah.
We were watching an older movie.
Yeah.
And the dresses were longer and.
Yeah. Right.
Compared to what we saw at our granddaughter's graduation.
Yeah.
And how they were dressed. And,
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
were so short.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
What does that do with young men who see this? I mean,
Yeah.
it's just like they're inviting them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot right now about celebration of the body and body shaming, and there's a lot on well, guys are responsible for their eyes. And there's stuff on the, there's not much left to the imagination. And, this whole thing goes on, again and again. It's really, and again, this is where we say, okay, what does this commandment mean now to us, in this particular time and in this particular space or situation, kind of a thing. So,
Situation,
What's that?
the Me Too situation
Mhm.
would
Yeah.
say. You shouldn't, blame the guy for the way I'm dressed.
You shouldn't blame the guy or you shouldn't blame the woman.
You shouldn't blame the guy for the way the woman dressed. Looking at me.
Right. Yeah.
Forcefully,
Yeah.
the way I'm dressed.
Well, ultimately in this, and this is in the covetousness too, is God recognizes that the thoughts can affect the relationship. And again, this is talking about a marital or a committed relationship, but also recognizes that the thought is what then leads to the action. And when you get to the action, then you've really broken, things in a terrible way. But yeah, it does get to that kind of thing. Me Too has called out some, that's when I was talking about cancel culture in the sermon. It has canceled out some folks who needed accountability. And there are probably times when, like anything, it has also created a witch hunt and destroyed somebody who didn't deserve that kind of a thing. So these are sticky situations and they're hard and they're not always black and white. Sometimes they are, but sometimes they aren't. So, and we're broken people and we enter, again, we kind of get into that discussion. Yeah, another comment and then we got to wrap it up. Go ahead.
That's the, do not steal and do not, bear in mind with the do not commit adultery one,
Uh-huh.
there's a, we're gonna get to this, I guess. Do not desire another man's house, do not desire his wife.
Yeah.
I think consider
Yeah.
these two as a pair.
Yeah. They really are. They really are. And that's what's it's kind of leading into is that the covetousness, the coveting, you can't criminalize coveting. You can't arrest somebody for coveting. When they act on it, then you have an issue. Either social issue or you have a legal issue, but it doesn't, the action doesn't come without the coveting coming first, right? You have to covet in order to get to that kind of place. And that's where we find ourselves. Okay. Let's close with a word of prayer. I did not complete my mission. I'm sorry, but we only have 2 left and really only 1 in my mind, but we'll get to that. Loving God, thank you for this time. Thank you for your spirit upon this place and for all the things that it raises and the discussions that we have and the things we're thinking about. Those are all part of it. Help us to be really return to that first commandment, to love you above all things and to be centered in you, and guide us in these questions and discussions that we have, and guide us to be your servants and to be your witnesses. And we pray that in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank y'all. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Shoot.
So that's one thing, he's had years of